Hello, everyone, and welcome to the American Family Insurance Dream Bank, where we believe in the transformative power of dreams. My name is Andy Frisky. I'm a senior dream curator here at DreamBank, and on behalf of our team, we are so thrilled to have you with us. As we get started, we always like to learn where people are joining us from and encourage you to share so in the chat section if you are comfortable today. And we'd love to take a few moments before we kick things off to share a little bit about DreamBank for those of you who maybe aren't familiar. So here at American Family Insurance, we believe that communities are stronger and the future is brighter when people are actively pursuing their dreams. And that's why DreamBank was created just over 10 years ago. It's an inspirational community destination and digital experience that is dedicated to dreamers everywhere. Our offerings are designed to help you celebrate the dream journey, overcome obstacles, and to stay motivated. But really excited to introduce our featured speaker today, Ben Killoy. So Ben grew up on a farm in southern Wisconsin and joined the United States Marine Corps immediately after high school. He transitioned out of the military in 2007 and began the hardest battle of his life, trying to find a place as a veteran, business owner, leader, and family man. He faced many struggles along his path, including dropping out of college, losing a job, and starting a family. And though his journey to becoming a better dad, through his journey to becoming a better dad and finding his purpose, Ben found a passion for coaching others through life transitions and creating an intentional legacy for his family. Ben now helps other dads find more to life by redefining the parameters for living and creating a life worth living and leaving behind. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to you, Ben. Ben, take it away.
Thank you, Andy, and everyone who is online with us today. I am really excited to be here to share my story and hopefully allow some insights into your story for or through me sharing mine. So I want to give you the title of my speech, but also something below it, which is there is more to life than being alive. And we're often just told to go into the world and make a living, but rarely told how to live. And I want to ask you a question to follow that up. Have you ever been in a spot in your life where you just keep asking yourself, there has to be more to life than this? That there just has to be more to life than an 8-to-5 job. That there just has to be more to life than fill in the blank. That is a question almost every human being is probably asked at one point in their life. There's just got to be more to life than this. As Andy said, my name is Ben Killoy, and I work with dads directly, and I'm here to help you understand how to get more from life by explaining what I call the 3 L's to life: lead, love, and legacy. But before we go all the way in there, we first need to understand a story. We need to time travel back to 2001. I'm 38 years old now, and in 2001, I was in sophomore year of high school. It was baseball. Baseball season starts in March here in southern Wisconsin. And it was like any other baseball year. I had done baseball before. It wasn't unfamiliar to me. But this year, a particular story got rooted. And I want to set the stage for you. Because in this moment, imagine a classic small town American baseball field. The grass has been cut. The away team and the home team have warmed up. And there's a moment where the coach reads off the roster. Pitcher, catcher, first, center, third, shortstop, left, center, right. And this was a moment that would happen often, that the roster would be read off, and there would always be one name missing from that: mine. You see, that year, we played 98 innings of baseball, and I played 2 of them. Even more so, I saw life that year through a chain link fence sitting on the bench. To me, at that point, I had this new definition being applied that you can do the work in life that everybody else did, but they get to play on the field of life, not me. Little did I know this story would become a subconscious belief for the next 15 years. It wasn't until Corona came around that I actually was able to unpack the story and even realize that this story was working out in my life. Imagine subconsciously if you believed your entire life was meant to be a bench warmer, what would you be missing out in your life? You would be asking yourself some really hard questions. But my story was not done in sophomore year, and it was really just getting started because, as Andy said, I joined the Marine Corps right out of high school. I would have been voted least likely to join the Marine Corps out of high school. It was my dare to be great moment to do the opposite of anything I've ever done in my life up to that point. And it was this moment that would begin to teach me things that I wouldn't later understand until 10, 15 years later. Because this same limiting belief from sophomore year of baseball showed up in the Marine Corps. In boot camp, instead of getting out in front and trying to lead, I was always trying to not be seen. Everybody else would get those leadership positions. Everybody else would do and get promoted. There was one moment in particular in the Marine Corps that cemented and kind of illuminated what was going on underneath the surface. I want you to imagine it's Okinawa, Japan. It's really hot and humid in Okinawa, Japan. It's like breathing underwater. And this was a morning. I had just gotten to the island, and our motivated platoon sergeant decided to run us. So it's about 5:15. We're out running, and we're about halfway around the base. And I was starting to fall out. Now, this wasn't unfamiliar. I absolutely hated running. I was consistently falling out and giving up on myself. Except this time, the platoon sergeant wanted to try to motivate me to get back up. So at the top of his lungs, he yells, "Killoy, are you weak?" Without hesitation, I say, "Yes, sir." And I cemented this belief that, yes, I was weak. Yes, I do quit. And it cemented this idea that I can't level up past these things and were preventing me from moving forward. Fast forward, March 26th to 2012, I become a dad. I'm 30 years old at the time. And I remember a particular moment when my daughter turned 2. I remember looking in her eyes in her crib and thinking, how can I take you into your life if I can't even do it for myself? What hope is there for you and me to be able to make you a human being into being successful is if I can't do it for myself? That's a really dark thought. Maybe you can relate to a thought like that, either as a mom or a dad. To give you some context of what this problem felt like the movie Independence Day from 1995. Imagine yourself in New York City, looking up, and you see the clouds where the spaceship is getting ready to be revealed and settling in over the city. And you look up at this alien attack ship that's massive. It's so big you can't even fathom your little space in compared to it. When I looked up, the problem in my life was I don't know how to do this thing called life. I remember feeling alone. I remember asking myself hard questions like, I wonder if anybody's going to be at the end of my life and care that I was here. In case you're counting, that's 2 really dark thoughts at a really early time in my life. Both felt impossible to overcome. So, how do you overcome that? What is the virus equivalent to bring down that attack ship? As most things in life go, the answer is almost always easier than we think. A friend of mine gave me this quote: if you want a result in your life that you've never had, then you need to do things that you've never done. I was like, huh, I think there's something here. Not sure what yet, but I feel like there's some juice in this idea. So I started to unpack it. What was that result I've never had? What was this thing that I was chasing maybe that was just out of reach? And it came to me. Friends. I never had real friends growing up. After coming out of the Marine Corps, I felt like I was alone. People I went to high school with were in different parts of their life. They grew without me, and I was alone. So I was like, okay, I think this is it. I've always chased friends, but never had them. So I'm like, what am I not doing? It's not like I'm for a lack of trying. I wanted friends. Like, why hasn't this result shown up? And then it hit me. Remember that time in high school, Ben, where you asked a girl out and she said no? That really hurt. So instead of dealing with it, processing it like a human being, and moving past it, you just decided to apply it to everybody. Let's just avoid rejection altogether. I'm like, you know what? That's probably it. I now have the thing that I'm never doing. I don't talk to people. So I'm like thinking in my head, that's not the best reason to not talk to people. And that's not the best reason to not have friends. So I think I have a good idea of what this problem is. I think I have a good idea of what I need to start doing. Now it's the how. How do you solve this problem? Well, lo and behold to me, I was already visiting the place where this problem was going to get fixed. And for me, the problem became clear when I would visit the park. I would go to the park in our neighborhood, and I would always think like, that dad looks like he'd be cool to talk to. But I'd always say in my head, you know what? They probably had a really hard day like I did, and they probably just want to be alone and play with their kids. And eventually, seasoned with my new advice and my new mindset, I eventually said, you know what? Screw it. Let's go ahead and say hello. That moment proved a couple things. One, both of us were just playing chicken. We both wanted to talk to each other just as much as the next person. And repeating that enough times, I was able to gain insights into who I could be. And I also learned this very fundamental idea that now is advice that I always give anyone I run into. Hello is the most powerful word in the human language. And you are just always one conversation away from a completely different perspective on life. I've had many conversations that have changed it and how I see the world forever. Airports to grocery stores to random things, activities with my kids. What we don't know is that friends are the mirror for the value that we struggle to see. Maybe that you're like me and you have this story in your head that's distorting how you see your life, like beer goggles, that it just looks filtered. And you struggle to see what could be possible if you didn't have this story playing out in your life. The reason why I always suggest hello is because friends are the mirror for what we can't see. They don't see where we've been. They see where we could go. I am here doing this. This particular speech, this career, as a path that is completely different than where I was when I first started. I am here because early on, people reflected back to me, Ben, the way you put words together is not like other people. And I was like, huh, no one's ever really said that. And that was in 2017. And here I am today speaking to you. What I want you to understand about this story and your story is the first L, lead. We often get hung up on the idea of leadership as this ability to lead people at work, the ability to influence others. And after reading gobs and gobs of leadership books, I forgot one of the most important leadership traits the Marine Corps taught me, but I had forgotten. Know thyself and seek self-improvement. That self-leadership, how you lead yourself, is how you lead your life. This basic idea is the one that I needed to focus on. That more often than not, we are the common denominator of what's going wrong in our life. If we're struggling to achieve our dreams, if we have this place that we're going to and we can't get there, never underestimate that we are the common denominator. Or a favorite office phrase where people are often saying, all I find myself doing all day is fighting fires. Have you ever said that? Well, good question to ask is, are you the arsonist? This idea of understanding who we are, how we lead, how we show up, how we see the world, that ability to lead is a very underestimated component in building the life and going from just this feeling of being alive to the feeling of living. That living is this place of I move past my limiting beliefs. I engage with the world and how it shows up. I want you to imagine your life as a book. Take a moment, visualize it in your head. Now imagine how many chapters does that book have? How many pages does it have? Is it really thin paper because there's so many pages? Now ask this important question. If this entire book is your life story, how many pages were ripped out because they were too hard to read? How many pages in your life are ripped out because they're too hard to read? Sit with that for a second. How many pages are ripped out of this book because of the pain that you felt with it? It's natural to rip out the pages that hurt. Pain is things we often don't want to relive. Pain can be these things that hold us back. It can be like carrying a bag of rocks on your back that eventually you just start to ignore and just say like, oh, man, life feels really heavy today. Maybe it's heavy because that pain hasn't been dealt with. One thing that became clear in my life as I began to unpack it, rewire it, and find new ways to do life is realizing that there's a fundamental principle in life that we often don't acknowledge. This is the garden. Now, imagine you have a garden in your backyard, and it's maybe not growing as good as it could. What do you put on that garden if you want bigger tomatoes? What do you put on that garden if you want bigger flowers? The thing that I had to learn the hard way in life is that when you want a better garden, you put more fertilizer on it. You put more manure. The pain in our life, those chapters that we ripped out, it's the manure. Now, you might also be able to think like, you know what? There's people where I could walk by their life and I feel like there's an odor almost coming from it. Oftentimes, the analogy that dives into this further is when you aren't dealing with your pain, it's just kind of piled up on the surface and all that odor can leak out and all the nutrients go with it. However, if you take what's on the surface, work it into the soil, learn how to till the soil, become a servant of the soil, your pain begins to have purpose. Find the purpose in your pain. Find that thing that gets clogged on the inside when you think of maybe what's holding you back. as you think about your dream, you are here part of the American Dream Bank family because you're trying to find your dream. You're trying to get out there and live your dream. Never underestimate, you are best aligned to help the person that you once were. You are best aligned to help the person that you once were. Think about that for a second. I've spent most of my life trying to think of random ideas that I could do to make a business, to create my dream. And the reality was, the person I know the best, myself. I can walk up to certain dads and I can connect with them just like that because I was them at one point. Think of the questions that you were answering 5 years ago and wondered, do I have those answers now? Could I create a business around that idea to get through it, to find my dream? The irony in the garden analogy is what we think are the things that are holding us back. We think the stories like my baseball year. We think that these things are the things, are the reasons why our dreams don't come true. In 2017, I did an exercise and I wrote a letter to myself in the context of a close friend who just wanted to remind me why I was worth it. And I'm writing this letter along, realizing it's me writing it, not expecting anything miraculous to come out of it. And in it, I write the most profound thing that I've ever written to myself, still to this day. I start talking to myself and telling myself that I think all of these stories from high school, bullying, all of these failures, this inability to be me, that the real me mattered, this inability was what was holding me back. And all of a sudden I tell myself very nonchalantly, Ben, early in life, people pulled you down so that you would be ready to pull them up. Let that sink in for a second. Early in life, people pulled me down so that I would be ready to pull people up. Life is not happening to us. It's happening for us. That pain, well, no matter how difficult it might have been, doesn't validate it's right or wrong. It just means it is. It happened. Understanding how it happened for you, what you're now more capable of because you walked through that crucible. This is where the juice of life can come from. Leads me to a fundamental principle that dives into love. Is that to unconditionally love others, you need to unconditionally love yourself. And I hope it comes through that I'm not just talking about the good parts. I'm talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly. That until we understand how to love all three of those, find the purpose in the pain, move through it, work it into the soil, only then can we go into the world to give love unconditionally and not expect it in return. Because often, those stories, that pain, it requires us to get something from the outside world. And often that outside world is never going to be enough. Have you ever tried loving on someone to hopefully get love back? Did that work? Did that lead you to the spot that you need to be, that you wanted to be? Learning to love the good and the bad and the ugly. Next, I want to ask you a hard question. We're going to time travel back in your life. Who was your first best friend? Which person was that very early childhood friend that you remember instantly? For me, that was my grandma. This is her holding my first daughter, Sophia. She was at the end of our driveway. She was always there. She was always like a warm chocolate chip cookie. always ready, warm and morsel. She was there when I got off the bus. She was there in the summer. I learned how to bake. I learned how to sew, everything through this woman. And what I learned through working through my story is she taught me what intentional love was. What love giving freely without expectation of anything in return. She gave me this model to look for, to strive for, to ask for. This idea of love is at the core of what will fuel you forward. Understanding that story within yourself, curating self-love, creating this ability to have a rich soil, that anything that grows from your soil is something that you can use going forward. That the trees that grow from your soil in the future will provide shade to someone who needs it. That the dream of what you want to do grows to a point where it can provide shelter and refuge as employees to someone else. This idea of love is one of the things that we often don't spend enough time looking at. Our relationship with love is a question that we need to dive into in order to make our dreams come true. Relearning love is our second L. Let's dive into that third one, legacy. Let's dive into vision. Are we creating a life worthy of being passed on? That's a really gut-wrenching question, rooted in my first midlife crisis when I was around 30. Is this life worthy? If you were to put your life on eBay right now, would people buy it? Would people trade places with what you're leaving behind? Is your leadership in your life impacting generations to come? This idea of vision, the idea of working towards something, your dream, this is an important part of our legacy. Maybe, as I ask this question, you're thinking, Ben, I don't have a vision. The problem with the way we're taught how life works is we're only taught how to make a living. When you have this only raw foundation that life is about going to make a living, collecting your paycheck, going for your 40 hours a week, you're living day to day, and you're not headed in a particular direction. And often, maybe, depending on where you're at and how your story has unfolded, your life feels like a roundabout from the Truman Show that you just can't break out of. And no matter what you do, no matter what road you take, you end up right back where you started. There was a quote that helped me get to this spot to clear up my vision and understand where it was going wrong. I was driving to work about 8 years ago. I was in front of an Ace Hardware. I remember it like it was yesterday. If there is hope in the future, there is power in the present. John Maxwell. This quote struck through me like a bolt of lightning. What this quote illuminated in my life was when I feel hopeful in the future, I feel like anything is possible today. But when that hope would crash in the future, it would be like a blue screen on Windows. Everything would go down, and the only thing that would make it better, Oreos and ice cream. Got to make sure they're double stuffed. That's not how you get your life to be better. That's just a blueprint for going back to the roundabout. So as I dove into this quote, I had to ask the hard question, what's going on the inside here? Why is this quote? Why does my hope and my current present so intertwined? What I had to learn the hard way was I was outsourcing my hope to others. I was outsourcing my hope to others. Did you know that if you blame your manager for your problems, you never have to be accountable for not getting the promotion? Did you know that if you blame the government for not solving your problems, you don't actually have to fix your problems? The key problem with all of those is you're still stuck in the problem. It's the only we can prevent forest fires analogy. Understanding that I was outsourcing my hope to others, and when it fell, it would crash everything. Realizing that I had to bring my hope back inside and realizing how I could get through it was key for my story to unfold. Realizing that this hope was directly attached to vision. If there isn't a hope for a brighter future, it's very difficult to pull yourself out of bed and get to the gym and do that workout that you know you need to be doing. But man, if you've got hope, anything is possible. The idea that I'm here speaking on the DreamBank was something that I was hopeful for 2 years ago when I first met Andy. And here I am today. When it comes to vision, there's a couple different ways that we can go about it. And I'm always the fan of leveraging physics. And there's nothing better than physics than Jupiter and gravity. When you think of your vision, I want you to ask yourself a couple questions. Is the vision you have for your life big enough? That if this vision come true, would it 10x your life from where you are today? Does it have a Jupiter-sized gravity that pulls you? The reason why it's so important to have a Jupiter-sized vision and to ask yourself, is it big enough? Is this a 1x goal or a 10x goal? Is that 10x goals are actually easier to reach because of this weird psychology of how your mind works. Did you know that for a 1x goal, to say make $100,000 in your business in the first year of having it, there's a lot of different roads to get you there. You can create a lot of different products. You can do that in a lot of different ways. But did you know that to say that you want to make $1 million in your business next year, there's probably only 1 or 2 levers that you could pull to get you to $1 million? Let's pull it back a little bit further. Why is the Jupiter-sized gravity so important? If you have a story, either similar to mine or even heavier, if you feel like there's these things pulling you back, that there's these ropes around you, like trying to hold down an elephant, and you're like, no matter how far I try to push, there's just something holding me back. You know what will break that? A Jupiter-sized gravity. Because often, maybe you can resonate with this. Maybe you're in that mode where you've spent more of your life thinking in the past than living in the future. You know what a really simple, free antidote is for that? Create a Jupiter-sized gravity so that you're more excited about going forward than worrying about what the past meant. And any of the people that I've worked with and coached, it doesn't take everything in your life in the past to be understood. It only takes a few key stories that you find repeating that roundabout to interrupt those patterns, interrupt those stories, work those stories into the soil. And in that moment, the gravity takes over. The gravity can be this idea that allows us to change our life and achieve our American dream. But there's a problem with this. Maybe you felt it. There is this thing called responsibility, also known in the modern world as adulting. It requires a certain level of understanding. It requires a certain basic operating of how to be a successful adult. And thinking back to the quote about hope, I want you to accept and own that the only way forward is to be responsible for your own happiness. Own that. Breathe it in. Leverage it as you go forward. Because only when you accept responsibility for your happiness does happiness actually arrive. This idea of what we do, how we show up, what changes in our life, it all begins with us. How we show up is everything. Your relationships, your marriage, your partner, your coworkers, your relationship with your boss. 98% of life can be wired back to, are you being responsible for your own happiness? And understanding how to change it, grow it, and move forward. So, there is more to life than being alive. I've laid out for you a recipe of learning to lead yourself, relearning to love yourself, creating this vision and legacy of where your life is going. Is your life worth passing on? Are you in the direction creating something that impacts generations? The secret to life is often the simplest. That life is something we experience, discover, and imagine. The irony in what society tells us to do is that by having a living, making a living, that this is it. This should be the checkbox that makes it all better. I can tell you when I transitioned out of the Marine Corps, my American dream quickly turned into my American hell. Because I wasn't leading myself, I wasn't learning to love myself, and I did not have a vision. I was running on the standard American dream that was not mine. I wasn't experiencing new things. I was not inviting adventure. I was not discovering who I could be. I was not doing things like this and putting words together and understanding how they could help people. And I was not imagining what my life could be. For those of you in Wisconsin, you might know that this is Devil's Lake. This was a moment that I took this picture in 2020, the height of the pandemic and of all craziness. And a friend of mine called me up and said, "Hey, you want to go to Devil's Lake?" And I was like, I don't know. I don't think people like me do that. Now, at this time, I had also lost my job this year. I was a stay-at-home dad. So as I work through this story, I'm thinking, and I'm living my life and trying to build my business, figure out what this could be a stay-at-home dad, rewiring it through Corona. This idea, when I had that thought, I realized, like, what's the point of creating this life if I can't go do something fun like this? What's the point if I can't say yes to go up to Devil's Lake and have fun? People like me can do that. It feels so weird to have that thought in my head today, because now this is one of our favorite trips every year up to Devil's Lake and experiencing what life can be like. I remember this year in particular, we went up there, and I remember thinking in my head, how do you know when you've made it? How do you know when you've arrived at whatever it is that you're shooting for? And it hit me that I had made it, because I made the choice with my own time to invest it in to go up to Devil's Lake. That's how I knew I made it. I still have goals. I still have massive visions for my life. But I had arrived at this place of actually living, because I was able to choose where I went, what I did, free of some story that was in my mind of what I could or couldn't do. The school bus. something that any mom or dad has experienced, and any person growing up getting on the school bus has experienced. But this moment had a particular power for me. So it's January 26th, 2020. It's the day I find out my position at work is being eliminated. Everything started to change from that moment on. This was February 4th. We had rewired our life. I shut down early care so the kids could get home so we could save money. And I remember purposefully watching my kids get on the bus. And I remember thinking consciously in my mind, I've already won. I had just lost my job, and to have that thought was really powerful. Because in that moment, this was the moment I was living for and searching for. That this moment was the one where, man, every time the kids get on the bus, I am out there at the corner, giving them hugs and putting them on that bus, because that was a moment I was chasing for so long. And understanding how I could live my life, understanding where I could go, and understanding how that all could work. All of that was in this moment, not something that we often think about. Living is planting flowers in your front yard and having the kids help, and have half the neighborhood come over and help. Living is saying yes to Girls on the Run 5K with my daughter and running alongside her and cheering her on as she runs through the 5K. This is not anything that I would have done prior. The irony in life, what we're trying to create and discover with our dreams, is the moments every day just like this are the ones where we have the opportunity for us to live. The idea of living isn't something that you have to wait for. Living is found in these everyday, ordinary moments that allow you to be at peace with where you are, find the beauty in where you are, and finding the ability to remember. I have a lot of hard days being a stay-at-home dad, especially during the Corona times, having the kids stay home. But at the same time, you know what I also learned? Emotions are temporary. Memories are forever. My phone does not remember a single bad day. All it is filled with is glorious days of hiking, going fishing, exploring like this, and doing things that I will cherish for the rest of my life. Because I had a vision, a Jupiter-sized gravity pulling me towards something, I had the clarity of thought to know that when I was 50, I was never going to wish I went and got a job. That the only thing I'm going to want back is time with my kids. Was it hard? Yes. Is it worth it? Yes. And there's such a difference in just being alive and going through the motions and living and experiencing them day by day with your kids, your loved ones. Life happens in the moments right in front of us. But the problem is when we're living in our mind from stories like baseball and the Marine Corps and all these stories that are holding me back, it distorts what's right in front of me. The ability to see my life clearly. Every day right in front of you, those moments exist. Your call to action today, after leaving here, is to believe in yourself in a way that you haven't. To believe in yourself in a way that takes you to places that you never thought were possible. To break the rules that you've learned life by. To redefine the definition of being alive. To find your own definition of living. And find ways to live that. Make a declaration. Hang it on your fridge. That today, November 17th, is the day where everything changed. Everything became different today because of how you see your life going forward. Think about your legacy and what you will leave behind. Your legacy of what you leave behind is everything. What you do on this earth is important, but what you leave behind is 10 times more important. It takes intention. John Maxwell also has a great quote that intentional living is important because no one accidentally went uphill. You have to intentionally make the choice to go uphill. And most things in life require you to go uphill. Remember that there is more to life than just being alive. Leading and understanding and developing your own self-leadership through your life and your stories. Relearning to love yourself is the core philosophy that we often don't spend enough time in. And the legacy question, what will you leave behind? As a gift for everyone on this call, you can head over to benkilloy.com. I have opened up my calendar for 10 spots for a free Design Your Legacy call. That maybe on this call, you have awareness that something's missing, but you're struggling to paint it. That you have the canvas, but you don't have the picture. Take this opportunity, no obligation, free of charge. Let's go ahead and design what could be possible in your life going forward. And remember, you were always just one hello away from changing your life. And on the other side is the conversation, potentially like this one, that could change how you see the world forever.
Ben, thank you so much for that. Some great insights and wisdom nuggets in there. I wanted to open this up. We have some time for Q&A left. And it looks like that there's a couple questions that have come in. If you're ready for it, Ben.
I am ready.
All right. So this
Well,
one,
I don't know if you can ever be ready for Q&A, but I am ready as much as you can be.
Sounds good. For someone who is neurodiverse, so this person mentioned they have ADHD, how do you keep the Jupiter-sized goal from seeming so overwhelming that they aren't possible, so they don't even know necessarily where to start? So how do you keep that those Jupiter-sized goals from seeming so overwhelming?
I can say that I'm not diagnosed with ADHD, but I definitely feel like an ADHD entrepreneur. And often what we struggle with sometimes is when we think about the Jupiter-sized goal. For example, my goal is to speak in front of 10,000 people while being a stay-at-home dad. Those two things govern 100% of my decisions. And sometimes it doesn't have to be the goal. I think that's something else that we get hung up a lot, is that we think that this goal is the goal. It's actually more important just to have a goal, to have you something that starts questioning your future choices more than your past. I would also add that breaking down those Jupiter ones and using that 10x thinking, listing out what are all the ways that I could make this goal happen, and just expand on, don't use rules of life, just get creative. Like, how are the different ways that I could make that goal happen? And when you use the 10x thinking, you can quickly cross them off and be like, that's not going to get me there. It's not that's going to get me there. And then once you kind of have this path, you pull it back to where you are. And I'll season it with this one thing, that when you go into the future with your goal, an important part of that process is understanding, who are you 10 years from now when you're living that goal? Journal about that. Who are you? What do you do for a living? What do you do with your time? Who do you spend your time with? Figuring out who you need to become, character traits, skills, to make that vision happen, you can then come back to the present. What's missing? What don't I have that I need to have in order for that to come true? And realizing the two easiest hacks to make any goal happen is the right conversation that can help you close your way. And realizing that the people you surround yourself with will help influence how fast you get there. So if you realize that you need to have real estate connections to make your goal happen, and if you realize now, I don't know anybody in real estate, a simple next step is simply, I need to find more real estate people. Often realizing this gap has often helped me. Like right now, there are things that I'm not good at yet. I need to be, So I'm going to connect with people that are good at it and work on becoming that person I need. And focusing on who that person needs to be in the future will help you become that person today.
I love that, a design thinking principle, right? A gap analysis, current state versus future state, and that's something that I personally have utilized in my own life, and in aiding with my goals as well too. So thank you for that, Ben.
And look where it's gotten you. You're leading the DreamBank.
Many hands make for light work. So Angelique, it looks like you have your hand raised. I don't know if you wanted to come off of mute and ask Ben a question. Give it a few seconds here. I know sometimes there can be a delay. If not, just shoot me a message and we can certainly come back to you. Lots of praise coming in, Ben. Again, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. Thank you all for taking the time to join us here today. If you did have a few more questions, go ahead and pop them in the chat. Ben, you know, one of the things that you touched on somewhat early on in the presentation was having pages been how many pages have been ripped out of your book by yourself, right? And using them as fertilizer for your garden. And that's something that definitely registered with me. Another thing you talked about was unconditional love in themselves. And this is something that, at least in my conversation with individuals at DreamBank, and even with myself, it's not something that comes naturally or easy to everyone, especially based on their circumstances or their path in life. What are maybe a few tips to help with the unconditional love, especially for those who don't quite have that vision that you described yet? Maybe a few tips to help with that.
Depending on how your life has happened and depending how much depth you've begun, because if there's two things that I've noticed, but most people could do, and every human being needs this, is we don't have a wide enough view of how wide the world really is. We're told it's about 3 lanes wide. In reality, it's 1 million lanes wide, which is why hello is so important, because you'll meet people that do things that you can't even imagine. I can't tell you how many times I will ask the question, you do what, make how much for a living? Just 2 weeks ago, I'm going to Uber in Vegas. And the guy sells and buys hotels as a realtor. Never one of a million years would I've imagined like a realtor niche being buying and selling hotels. I'll never unhear that. So diving into your question, Andy, is that depending on how much width and depth you truly have, it can be difficult to understand that thing that's holding you back. A question that I always like to peel it back is using a doctoral thesis analogy. So if you write a doctorate and become a doctor in anything, you have to write a thesis. A thesis has one real fundamental rule. It has to be something that makes the world a better place. Sounds pretty tall order once you understand how it works. It's not just a thesis. It's a thesis that has to make the world a better place, a better idea that we currently don't have. I always ask the person, if your life was a thesis, if you wrote a thesis on your life, what was that lesson that you kept tripping on over and over and over? And if you believe in God and have faith in God, if God was vindictive, what lesson did he keep putting in front of you that you really had a hard time understanding? Generally, this tripping point, the thing we trip over, this lesson that we're really blind to really understand how we are the common denominator, that is the weed on top of the garden that has roots to places that we need to do the work through, understanding the story that's connected to it. Also realizing that the brain has this natural ability. So analogy I always like to use how our stories unfold is your brain is like Google. It's very lazy. It doesn't, when you have a moment in front of you, so you're going to go back to your life after this webinar and life's going to keep happening to you in whatever way. When life happens, a moment appears, the first thing that your brain says is, have I been here before? The very first thing, any moment happens, your brain wants to create a response. How should I respond? Whether your kids are yelling at you, whether an employee is yelling at you, or a manager is getting ready to call you in the office. Very first thing your brain says is, have I been here before? And it Googles your entire life, subconscious and conscious. And if it finds a record in that Excel sheet that has a moment similar to what you're getting ready to experience, it will copy and paste it. Once it's pasted, the moment's applied and the pattern repeats. You have about 5 seconds to interrupt that pattern. And the question to try to understand. So a moment happens in front of you. Maybe tonight, your kids are going to get off the bus, your life's going to get started, and maybe you're going to yell at your kids. You're going to lose your cool. Spending time realizing that response wasn't unique. It was a copy and paste from something earlier. Spending time and understanding and just trying to go fishing a little bit. If a response came out that I didn't necessarily enjoy, and I keep doing it, ask yourself, what memory did that come from? It came from somewhere. It's like the movie Inside Out. There's a bunch of random memories that get sucked up into the brain and they get jumped on like the bubblegum song. Somewhere, that memory comes from somewhere. And realizing where that memory can come from, you can interrupt that pattern and then insert something new. Realizing that there's this magic trick to life that is this memory Googling. And then once you know where it came from, and even if you don't figure out where it comes from, realize there's a trick in my mind going on that I can paste something new. Because if I slow down my breathing, if I slow down my mindfulness in the moment, I can slow it down to the point of inserting a different response. Because the response is the only thing we control in life. That's it. Inputs come in, responses come out. Your responses are generally your default based on how life has already happened. And understanding that I can create a new response is a way that I use with different clients to get them to understand where are these behaviors, where are these beliefs, where are these thought patterns coming from.
Well, I enjoy that, and I found myself in similar moments too. You know, stopping, altering the pattern requires a level of self-awareness. So I appreciate that. I think that's it's good insight right there, and thank you for that. I think, is there one more L to there? I wanted to make sure we got the right 2 L's in Killoy, right?
2 L's in Killoy, correct?
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Resend that here, and then I also put another link in the chat as well too. I know I've gotten a couple questions that have come in so far asking about this recording. It is being recorded, and I put a link to our YouTube page that is on there. And there's Ben's website as well. Ben, again, I want to thank you so much for this. Thank you all for tuning in. That is all the time we have for today, so we will go ahead and cap it there, and we will see you all next time. Take care.
Thank you, Andy.